All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Let's begin. Today's daf is daf Yud. We are picking up in Meretz Hashem on Testimony Days. I made a mistake. I read yesterday today's dedication yesterday. So really, the shir this morning is dedicated by Leah and Akiva Wexelbaum in honor of their children Yael and Shlomo Kanner on the birth of their daughter Nava Miriam, and a loving memory of their Oma's yahrzeit on the fourth day of Chanukah, Chana Bas Naftali. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshama will have an aliyah, and Nava Miriam will grow up to be an incredible Bas Yisrael. Shkoyach. All right, so I'll say let's go. So we're picking up. Let's actually pick up from on Testimony Base 9b 2, 4, 6, 7 lines up from the bottom. We started reading this case yesterday, but let's reorient ourselves with it today. Rav Ashi Tashma Sluchas. So also remember again, we're trying to discuss this dynamic between Safek Sakana and Safek Isser. And what we've begun to see is that Safek Sakana is treated more chamer versus Safek Isser, which isn't always treated more chamer. So we're trying to figure out, is that always the case or not? So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Ashi Tashma Sluchis Shenicha Megula. If a person left a container of, this is the Mayim Chayim, this is the spring water that's ultimately used for paraduma. Person left its sluchis open, uba umatza mechusa, and then a person comes back and he finds that sluchis covered. Tameya. Ultimately, again, we assume the water is tamei. But say tamei and it's meaning unusable for paraduma. Why? Shani omer adam tamei nichnas l'sham v'kisa. Because I assume that someone who was tamei came in and he must have covered it, and as a result of covering it, he came in contact with the water. Therefore, the water is unusable. However, if he left the water covered and then subsequently came and found it uncovered, if an animal, a reptile, a weasel, or a snake, according to Rabbi Gamliel, is able to get in there and ultimately drink from it, or even in the absence of a reptile drinking from it, but dew came into it in the evening, psula. Ultimately, again, it is possible. Why is this? Top of Yudam Adalef. Bipnei shedarkon shel shratzim legalos ve'in darkim lechasos. Because ultimately, again, the derech of a sheretz, I will say, is to uncover, but the derech of a sheretz is not to cover. So in other words, there's no chashash that a sheretz is going to take an uncovered kli and cover it. There is a chashash that a sheretz could go ahead and take a covered kli and uncover it. So I'll say, so the Marshal will skip the parentheses there. V'ilu safek mayim megulin asurin. But yet again, under all cases, a safek mayim megulin is always aser. Shmamina. So we finally do reach the conclusion that indeed shchamira sakanta meisura shmamina. So we reach the conclusion that what? That indeed sakanta is chamer meisura. That we deal with cases of sakana in a more chamerdik way than we deal with cases of Isser. Certain cases of Isser, sometimes you'll say a Safek Isser l'kula, sometimes you'll say a Safek Isser l'chumra, but in all cases of Sakana, we will always deal with Sakana l'chumra. So we'll say that's why any case in which you find a Safek Sakana, we will almost always rule l'chumra. Good, that closes out that sugya. Tanan Hasu, I'll say another very interesting sugya. We're picking up Yud Amud Aleph, about 7 lines down from the top. Tanan Hassam. Good. Okay. That's what I sound like. Right? Okay. So the guy goes like this. So Tanan Hassam. So we learned elsewhere. Listen to this. Gimel Mashkin Asurin Bishum Giloy. So we'll say now that we made reference ultimately again to Mashkin Megulin, right? Remember again this particular issue that halacha l'maisa. If you leave certain liquids uncovered overnight, there's a chashash that a snake may get into it, inject its venom, and chas v'shalom could have catastrophic events upon a person who subsequently drinks it. So now the Gemara says, by the way, it's not just water. Gimel mashkin asura mishum gilui. There are 3 different types of liquids that are asur alt gilui, that if left overnight will be considered asur. What are they? Mayim, yayin, v'chalav. right? So water, wine, and milk. Now, so we'll say when we say uncovered, remember again, that means open. That means open. It doesn't just mean out, rather it means open. The Kama Yeshu, so we'll say, this is actually an interesting shayla. So the Gemara says, so tell me, how much time is out? In other words, when we say that it's left overnight, right, or it's left out, how much time is that? So the Gemara says, so ultimately, again, enough time for the reptile to come from a makom karov, a close place, and drink from it. The kama makom karov. So I don't understand, what does that mean? What do you mean a close place? Rabbi Yitzchak Bered Rav Yehuda, kadei sheyetze mitachas ozen kli v'yishte. Enough time for the reptile to come out. This is most easily, I guess, imaginable by the snake. For the snake to slither out from by the handle of the kli and come up to drink. To which the Gemara says, Yishte hakachazi. If the snake is there and it's drinking, we see it. So the Gemara says, Ella Yishte v'yachzor l'choro. Rather, again, the Gemara says it's enough time ultimately for what? For the snake to come out, for the snake to come out of its hole. Go ahead and drink and return back to its hole. So what's interesting about this particular shear is, obviously when Chazal expressed this was a meaningful shear. I'll tell you something amazing. So I tried to, so you look in the Rambam and other places to see what the shear is. The Rambam actually quotes this verbatim. The Rambam Halacha L'Maaseh quotes this verbatim, that the shear for Mayim Megulin, Mashkim Megulin, ultimately again is the amount of time it takes for the snake to come out, slither up the kli, drink from the kli, and go back to its hole. Now, of course, again, what's the quantification of that? So we'll say, interestingly enough, when the Shulchan Aruch discusses the issue of Mayim Megulin, so again, there it talks about liquids left overnight. So it seems to be, again, although the Gemara is bringing down this shear of the amount of time for the reptile to get to the kli, drink from it, and go back, the shear as codified in halacha is left overnight. Good. Itmar. We'll say, here we go. This is an amazing case. Hashochet b'sakin. Get ready for this. Hashochet b'sakin v'nim seis pugum. We'll say, fascinating. A person shechs with the sakin, right? The shochet checks with the knife, and what happens? After the shchita, he finds that the knife has a pegima. We'll say, what's a pegima? Pegima is a nick. He finds that the knife has a nick. So we'll say, so the shaila, of course, is, what is the status of the shchita? So remember, again, this is now after the fact. If you look at Rashi, Rashi says, it's the second of the wide lines in Rashi. Hashochi b'sakin v'achakach nimtzeis peguma, v'yaduahu shekishashachat badak kodem shchita v'haya yafeh. Avalo badak achar shchiti. So we'll say, so the case over here is, he checked the knife immediately prior to shchita. He checked it, and then immediately after shchita, what happens? There is a nick in the knife. Right? Or I should say, not immediately after shchita. Rashi says, Avalo badak achar shchita miyad. Sometime after the shchita, he looks at the knife, and there is a nick. So we'll say, so the shaila is what? The shaila is what? When did the nick develop? Now here's what we know. At the moment he began the shchita, right before the shchita, what was the status of the knife? It was totally fine. So we're going to see what the possibilities are. So watch this. Rav Huna says, Afilu shiber ba'atzamos kol yom psula, chayshinun shema ba'ar v'nifkama. So let's work backwards. Rav Huna says, essentially what we have to be concerned with is that the knife got nicked on the hide. That as soon as the shochet began to cut the neck of the animal, the knife was nicked on the hide. Now, so that's therefore Rav Huna says the shchita is going to be possible. Now, not only that, but Rav Huna says as follows. Let's say immediately after the shchita, I was using that same knife to cut bones. Or I will say, I continued through the shchita, essentially decapitated the animal and started cutting off bones. So I'll say, so obviously if you use a shchita knife to cut bones, what's going to happen? Everyone knows what happens. Right? It's going to get nicked. Right? At the end of the day, right? So Rav Huna's shita is like this. Even if you are using the knife after the shchita to cut bones, and therefore you're going to say, I could have said the nick came from that, Rav Huna says you have to be choshesh that maybe the nick came from the initial contact with the hide, and therefore, again, the shchita is pasul. Okay, that's Rav Huna. Rav Chisda Amar Kshera. Rav Chisda says, no, it's kosher. Why? Shema be'etzem nifkama. Because we'll say, Rav Chisda will say, look, you checked the knife right before the shchita. The knife right before the shchita was totally fine. Obviously, the knife is now pogum. So we attribute that pegima to what? We attribute the pegima to a bone. He must have nicked the bone at some point in time. So let's analyze the machlokas. So Bishlam Rav Huna Kishmaite. So we'll say Rav Huna. Remember, Rav Huna's shita is actually a logical extension of the shita he espoused yesterday. What was the shita he espoused yesterday? Behema, right? Behema, becheskas isser omedes. Right? An animal has a cheskas isser. What's the cheskas isser? Evram Achai, excellent. Right? And when does that cheskas isser get removed? Only once you know with absolute certainty that you have a kosher bona fide shchita. In the absence of that absolute knowledge, we return the animal to the last known chazaka. The last known chazaka was the cheskas isser of Evram Achai. Therefore, Rav Huna says, listen, I'm looking at the knife now. It's nicked. It's nicked. I don't know when the nick happened. And it's possible that it happened when? Upon immediate contact initially with the hide of the animal. Because I don't know, the only thing I can do is return the animal to its original chazaka. Its original chazaka was cheskas isser, Evram Achai, therefore the shchita is possible. And Rav Chisda says that the shchita is good, right? Because maybe the knife got nicked on a bone. Ultimately, again, what's his logic? Amar Lacha, listen to this. He'll say to you like this: Etzem vadai pogim, or safek pogim. Here's what we know about saying: bone will certainly nick the knife. The hide, sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't. Safek pogim, safek lo pogim. Havi safek vevadai, vein safek motzi midei vadai. So we'll say, in Rav Chisda's world, you're looking at two possibilities. Possibility one is that the knife was nicked on the hide. Possibility two is that the knife was nicked on a bone. Bone certainly will nick the knife. We'll say that, meaning that's the absolute certainty. You can't cut through bone with the shchita knife without the bone getting nicked. That we know, without the knife getting nicked. That we know for sure. Hide, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't nick the knife. Therefore, Rav Chisda says we're looking at these two possibilities of a safek and a vadai. We'll go with the vadai and reject the safek. Therefore, we will attribute the nick in the knife to contact with the bone, not to contact with the hide, and therefore halacha l'maaseh the shchita is kasher. So we'll say, so this is the machlokes Rav Huna and Rav Chisda. Massive Rava l'siyur Rav Huna. So Rava wanted to go and bring a support to Rav Huna. Tav, listen to this case. Tav va'alav v'nimtzeis alav davar chotzeis. But so let's say a person went into the mikvah. So we know that again, halachas of mikvah 101, you can't have any chatzitzas. You can't have anything interrupting between the tovel, the person immersing, and the water. So let's say a person goes into the mikvah, he comes out of the mikvah, and he finds some type of chatzitza upon him. Afa pishin is asek ba'usahamin kol yom kulo, lo also lo tevila. But say now here's the interesting part. So let's say for argument's sake, post-immersion, this guy was dealing with he was dealing with dough. So it turns out he finds a little piece of dough on his elbow. On his elbow. So we'll say, so now what's the shaila? The shaila is, was that piece of dough on his elbow at the time of the mikvah? Or not, at the time of the immersion? If it was there at the time of the immersion, then halacha l'maaseh in the tefillah is not good. If it wasn't there, if it's post-immersion, then of course the tefillah is good. The novelty over here is, even if he was dealing with dough, the entire time after the immersion, the tefillah is not good. Lo also lo tefillah ad shiyomar. So ultimately, again, he cannot go ahead. The tefillah does not work. Ad shiyomar bari li shelo haya alai kodem lachem. Ultimately, we'll say the tefillah is only good if what? If he's able to say, I can say with absolute certainty that the dough was not on me at the time of the immersion. But if you cannot make that statement with absolute definition, then ultimately, again, the tefillah is not good. So says Rava. Now, in this case, v'ha'acha devadai tava. Now, watch this case. In this case, what do we have? Tvila certainly occurred. The individual certainly went to the mikvah. Safek hava alei, safek lo hava alei. So let's say, so now, so remember, the vadai is, he went to the mikvah. What's the safek? Was the dough on his elbow at the time of the tvila or not? Right, that's the safek. Vika motzi midei vadai. And I will say, yet what? What do we see? That the safek, if the dough was there, is motzi midei the vadai. What's the vadai? He went to the mikvah. So Rav is proving that, you see, we do say Safek Motzi Vade. So we'll say, why is this a part for Rav Huna? It's more a refutation of Rav Chisda, right? Because Rav Chisda said we're going to attribute the nick in the knife ultimately again. I'm sorry. No, it's a support for Rav Huna. Why will I say? Because even though, again, the bone certainly will nick the knife, the R will only possibly nick the knife. We see that Safek Motze Mide Vadai. And therefore, again, the Shechita will not be good. To which the Gemara says, no. The mikveh case is not a good right, and I'll tell you why. Shani Hasa. Te'ikala Meimar. Ha'emid Tami Al Cheskasa Ve'emelo Tabal. We'll say, here's the difference. The difference with the person who's going to the mikvah is that what? Is that halacha l'maisa, in a case of Safek, you could say, put him back on his chazaka. What was his chazaka? His chazaka was that he wasn't tovel. His chazaka was that he's tamei. So I will say, in a case of Safek, we generally return things back to their last known chazaka state. His last known chazaka state is tumah. Havahachanami says, I don't understand. I can say the same thing by the animal. Hachanami, hamid behema al cheskasa, ve'ema lo nishchata. So I can say the same thing by the animal. Ultimately, again, that's what? Say that I could put the animal back on its chazaka and say the animal wasn't shechted. The Gemara says you can't say that. Hari shchuta lefanecha. You can't say the animal wasn't shechted, because one thing you can't argue with is what? Is the mitzias. The mitzias is the animal's dead. The animal is geshacht right in front of you. To which the Gemara says, Hachinami hari tava lefanecha. So I can say the same thing over here. The person did the immersion. So you can't tell me that he didn't immerse. He's dripping wet with the mikvah. To which the Gemara says, Ha isyalda bereusa. We'll say, but even though, again, he might have gone to the mikvah, at the end of the day, there is a deficiency within him. Hachanami isyalda bereusa. Same thing with the animal. There's a deficiency in the shechita of the animal, to which the Gemara says, we'll say, a very important point. Not true. There's actually nothing wrong in the animal. Where's the suffix, Rabbi say? Sakin Israel, behema lo Israel. So we'll say, remember this point, because this is going to become very important a bit later on, which is that halacha l'maisa, the suffix over here, of course, ultimately is in the animal, because we're trying to figure out if the shechita is good or not. But Rabbi say, as opposed to the tvila case, where the suffix is in the gavra, here, in the shechita case, the suffix is in the chefza. Right, the suffix is not in the animal. As far as we can tell, or as if you were to check the simanim, the shechita looks just fine. There's a suffix ultimately again in the knife. We know the knife developed the pegima, it developed the nick, and our fundamental suffix is at what point in time was that nick developed? Was it developed immediately upon contact with the hide, in which case again the shechita was never good, or did it develop sometime post shechita, in which case the shechita is absolutely fine? So as Simar is making this very important distinction between the tvila case and the shechita case. In the tvila case, the problem is in the tvila case, the problem is in the individual. Did he have a chatzitza on his body or not? So we'll say the suffix there was he fit for tevila or not? The suffix in the shechita case is not in the it is ultimately in the animal, because it's whether or not the animal is kosher or treif, but the fundamental suffix is not in the animal itself, it's in the knife. Meise, Simari Zikasha, Shachat es haveshet, ve'achar kach nishmat ha'gargeres. Well, this is actually an interesting case. Look at Rashi for just a moment. It's 5 lines off from the bottom of Rashi. So we'll say this is by the shechita of a bird. So here Rashi quotes, Shachat es haveshet, ba'of. So we'll say, so we're talking about now shechita of a bird. Now we'll get into, obviously, we have not at all delved into the halachos of shechita. We've spoken about shechita, we've spoken about knives, begimas, we have not gotten into the halachos of shechita. Obviously, we'll get into that. So when it comes to birds, so under normal circumstances, an animal, in order to go and have a proper shechita, you have to shecht the majority of 2 simanim, right? The kana and the veshet, the esophagus and the windpipe. You have to go ahead and shecht the majority of those 2 simanim. By a bird, all you have to do is shecht the rov of 1 siman, right? Either one you want. So Rashi says, "V'shachat es haveshet." So let's say again, he went ahead and he shechted the veshet, right? He shechted the esophagus. So ba'of shehuchshru b'siman echad sulo chayshina leikor d'sheni v'haydina k'shchita b'veshet u'shmuta b'gargeres. So I'll say, listen to this. So the case here is as follows: shachat es haveshet. So I decided to go ahead and shech the bird by cutting the esophagus. Va'achar kach nishmat ha'gargeres. So we'll say, let's say afterwards, the gargeres, the trachea, the windpipe, was dislodged. So which means it was pulled out of place. Now, under normal circumstances, if before you shecht anything, one of the simanim is pulled out of place, that renders the animal a treifa. In this case over here, I shechted the bird, I shechted the first siman, and then subsequently the second siman is pulled out of place. So the Gemara says, Kshira, the bird is kosher. Why is the bird kosher? Because it will say after you shechted the first siman, the bird is shechted. It's done. Whatever happens subsequently, again, is not going to render the animal a treifa. On the other hand, Nishmata gargaris v'achar kach shachat es haveshet. Rabbi Seif, on the other hand, the windpipe is first dislodged, and then only afterwards the esophagus is cut. That animal is a treifa, and therefore psula. Okay. Easy cases so far. Shachat es haveshet v'nimtzeis hagageres shemuta. Ve'inu yodem kodem shchita nishmata im la'achar shchita nishmata. So we'll say, listen to this. Here's a problematic case. I cut the veshet, right? I shech the veshet. And then afterwards, what happens? I find the gargeres, right, or the kana. I find the windpipe dislodged. And what's the problem? I don't know when it occurred. Did it occur before the shechita, in which case again the animal is a treifa, or did it occur after the shechita, in which case the animal is absolutely kosher, and the dislodged kana doesn't really matter? So we'll say, so listen to this. Maisa, so this happened, v'amru, and the rabbis ruled, kol safek b'shechita pasal. Any case we'll say of safek in shechita is going to be pasal. So we'll say, so again, that seems to be a logical extension of what halacha? Safek da'araisa l'chumra, right? The laws of shechita are, again, the need to have an animal that is properly shechted is a din da'araisa. So ultimately, again, it seems to say if you have a safek in a da'araisa, you have to go l'chumra. Any safek in shechita is dealt with l'chumra. So the Gemara says, by the way, kol safek b'shechita la'asuyemai. Also, whenever you see a verbiage of kol usually comes to include something additional. All right, so what is it coming to include over here? My lav la'asuye kihai gavna. Rabbi say, is it not coming to include our case over here? Which case? Rabbi say, ultimately, again, where you found a pegima in the sakin, and you're not sure what. Did it develop before the shechita or after the shechita? And therefore, the principle tells me, kol safek b'shechita pasol. Ultimately, again, like Rav Huna said, halacha l'maisa, you have to rule the shechita pasol because there's a possibility, but our nifkama that it was nicked already on the hide before the shechita began. To which the Gemara says, lo, that's not what the kol safek b'shechita is coming to include. Rather, kol safek b'shechita is coming to include something else. La'asuye safek shaha safek daras. Rabbi say what it's coming to include is as follows. Let's say a person is shechting, and there's a safek if he did shehiyah. Right, Rabbi say means shehiyah means pausing over the course of the shechita. Remember again we spoke about the 5 different psulim by shechita. Shehiyah, pausing during shechita, is one of the psulim. Rabbi say, let's say again there's a safek. The shochet has a safek. Did he do shehiyah or not? Or safek daras. Rabbi say daras means that for shechita to be proper, the simanim have to be cut. If the shochet pressed the knife into the simanim, ultimately again, you could cut the simanim by pressing the knife in also. That renders the animal a treifa, and such an animal is not kosher. So if it is a safek, if he did shia, or a safek if he did drisa, ultimately again the shechita will be possible. So says the Gemara, umayshna. So the Gemara says, I don't understand, like, so what's the difference between these cases? In other words, if you're telling me that, meaning what the Gemara is asking is, still, when we say kol safek b'shechita is going to be aser, so what does it make a difference if the safek is a safek shehiyah, safek drisa, or a safek about the knife, right? If the knife developed a pekima before the shechita or after the shechita, at the end of the day, it's all a safek in shechita. And if your principle is true, then any safek in shechita should be resolved l'chumra. I'll tell you why. Based on what we said before. Hasam isyalda bare usabe behema. Hachasakin Israel behema lo Israel. Tushma will say you have to acknowledge the fundamental difference between the cases. The fundamental difference is that halacha lamaisa, in the case of safek shia, safek drisa, or for that matter, again, in the case of the bird where you're not sure if the kana was dislodged before the shechita, after the shechita, those are cases where the safek is in the animal. So whenever there's a case of a safek in the animal, the Gemara will paskin, safek shechita l'chumra. This case of the knife, the Gemara is just suggesting, is different. Now again, We're not saying it's different, therefore it doesn't follow the principle, or it's different and it still follows the principle. We're just acknowledging the fact that the case that we're dealing with over here, where you discover the pegima in the knife after the shechita, is different than the other cases of suffix b'shechita. Why? Because here the issue is not in the animal. As far as the animal is concerned, it looks glatt to us. The issue is in the chefza of the knife. Now, again, I will say, of course, the issue of the knife has a dramatic impact, repercussions, and ramifications on the animal, but the suffix is not really in the animal. The suffix is in the knife itself. So we'll say, so what is the halacha? So the Gemara resolves over here. So the Gemara says, Ve'ilchasa, listen to this. This is actually quite fascinating. Ve'ilchasa kavase di Rav Huna. So we'll say the halacha follows like Rav Huna. Remember again, Rav Huna was the one who said that they have to be choshesh that what? The pegima developed when it first touched the hide of the animal. So even before the shechita began, the knife had a pegima, and therefore ultimately, again, the shechita will be pasul. So listen to this. Ve'ilchasa kavase di Rav Huna kishelo shiber ba'etzem. Ve'ilchasa kavase di Rav Chisda kishe shiber ba'etzem. So I'll say this is actually quite fascinating. You don't usually find a halacha like this. That is very much a circumstantial halacha. So the Gemara says like this: if halacha lemaisa again, Moshe David, I think your stuff is up here. So the Gemara says as follows. I think your kids started moving your stuff last night. So I'll say, so what happens? So remember, the Gemara says something absolutely amazing. The Gemara says that halacha lemaisa, that I think that's Dr. Elman's, that halacha lemaisa. Oh, you don't have to. Okay. So, such service. Right? So, halacha l'maisa, if we say as follows: if you did not go ahead and break any bones, cut through any bone with the knife, then what? We have to assume l'chumra. We have to assume ultimately again that the knife may have potentially been nicked on the hide, and therefore the shechita will be pasul. Shechita will be pasul. If, however, you know that you cut bone with this knife, then halacha l'maisa, we will assume the shechita is kosher, because we will assume that ultimately the nick came from the bone. It's like Rav Chisda said, that ain't safek motzi midei vadai. Because if you cut bone, they will say then what we have over here is a vadai, that the bone will nick the knife, a safek, that maybe the hide will nick the knife. Obviously, the vadai will win out over the suffix. So we'll say, so again, so this is where the Gemara is paskening halacha l'maisa. If you did not cut any bones with the knife, then the shechita is pasul. We assume it got nicked on the hide. If you did cut through bone, then we attribute the nick in the knife to the bone, and ultimately, again, the shechita will be pasul. The shechita will be kosher. Excuse me. Now we'll say, obviously, we're cutting through bone in this case. When? After the shechita is complete. So watch this. So we'll say, so now what's interesting according to this formulation is it sounds like that Rav Chisda would hold, see, the fact that the Gemara says, we hold like Rav Chisda only when you cut through bones with the knife, which sounds like the Gemara is asking that Rav Chisda would hold his respective shita, even if you didn't cut through bones. So the Gemara is saying, we'll paskin like Rav Chisda when you did cut through bone, which sounds like Rav Chisda will hold that the knife is good even in a case where you didn't cut through bone. But if you didn't cut through bone, ela b'mai ifkam, right? What did you meaning? Where did the nick come from if you didn't cut through the bone? Oh, to which the Gemara says, I'll tell you where. Ema be'etzem demafrekes ifkam. Both say that the knife became nicked against the spinal cord, the mafrekes. So we'll say what ended up happening over here. So what Chisda will say is, lemaisa, there's almost always contact, or there's almost, we'll call it this, one could say there's probable contact with the bone in most shchitas. How so? If you shecht straight through, you'll end up ultimately again getting to the mafrekes, to the spinal cord, to the backbone of the animal. So we'll say, even though we'll see that bone is not as, in the animal at least, is not as tough as other bones, according to Rav Chisda, it's enough to go ahead and assume that that's responsible for the nick of the animal. Hava Uvda, supposed to listen to this. So one time this episode like this came up. So the Gemara says, Hava Uvda, V'taraf Rav Yosef ad Tleisar Chiyusa. And Rav Yosef went ahead and he paskin that up to 13 animals were tricked. Now we'll say, now what's the case here? Look at Rashi. Tleiser Chayusa, Shalo Badak Ben Zulazu, Ula'achar Shchitas Kula Nimtzas B'Mon. Watch this case. So the case here I will say is where the Shochet checked his knife before Shchit of animal number 1. And then what happens? This guy is good. He mamish, he just shechted 13 behemoths, one after the other. The only problem is he didn't check the knife in between each shchita. He looks at the knife after the last shchita, and what does he find? That it has a pagam, that it has a nick. So we'll say, so what happens? So this happened, and Rav Yosef said all 13 animals ultimately again are all treif. None of them can be consumed. So the Gemara says, Kiman, whose opinion does this reflect? Rav Huna. Both said this reflected Rav Huna's opinion. Va'afilu b'kamaisa. And ultimately, again, according to this version, he even treifed up the first animal. Because once again, remember, according to Rav Huna, what's the halacha? According to Rav Huna, the or. You have to be choshish that maybe the knife became pagum on the hide of the animal, and therefore again he treifed up all of the animals. To which the Gemara says, maybe lo krav chista ulubami kamaisa. So we'll say it could be that he was passing like Rav Huna, and therefore even the first animal would be considered treif, or maybe he held like Rav Chista, and the 12 are treif. The 12, because we will say according to Rav Chista, remember again in this case what will be the halacha? The first animal would be good. Why? Because what can we attribute the pigima to? To contact with the spine of the first animal. But at least that's enough to save the first animal. But if he didn't check the knife before the shechita of 2 through 13, ultimately those remaining animals will be treif. The other possibility is the olam kirav huna. Maybe he does hold like Rav Huna. The ikarav chista michdi misla talinon. So we'll listen to this. It must be that he's holding like Rav Huna. Because if he was holding like Rav Chista, let's analyze this. Michdi misla talinan mimai de be'etzem de mafrekes de kamai se'ifkim dilma be'etzem de mafrekes de basrai se'ifkim. So now the Gemara suggests that according to Rav Huna, it could very well be that why do you have to attribute the nick in the knife to the spinal cord of the first animal? Why don't you go ahead and attribute the nick in the knife to what? To the spinal cord of the last animal. And in fact, go ahead and paskin that all of the animals ultimately are kosher. So we'll say, so that ends that section. But what comes out, according to the Gemara of Yerabosai, is we will paskin both like Rav Huna and Rav Chista, all depending on the circumstances. If you did not cut any bones with the knife, then ultimately, again, we have to assume that the suffix will be usher, because there's a possibility that the knife became nicked on the hide itself, in which case the shechita from the beginning was no good. But in the event that you did cut through bone with the knife, then we could attribute the pegima ultimately again to the bone, and again the shechita would be good. So I will say, but interestingly enough, Rav Chista himself says you could always be tola on a bone. Why? Because we could assume that a person may have nicked the spinal cord. Okay, so that's how the Gemara seems to end off. Amrli Rav Acha Breid Rav Ravashi. So we'll say Rav Acha Breid Rav says Ravashi. Rav Kahana Matzrich Bedikusa Bein Kol Chad V'Chales. Well, listen to this. Rav Kahana paskind that you have to check your knife in between each and every shechita. That even if you're shechting multiple animals, we'll say what's interesting about this is as follows. See, remember again, we're talking in the world of chazaka. So in the world of chazaka, I might have thought that's what? That halacha l'maisa, once you check your knife once, it has a cheskas kashrus until when? So to the contrary, right? Yet the halacha is, Rav Kahana said that you have to check between each and every shechita. B'dikus bein kol chad v'chad. Kiman. So Rabbi say ultimately again, who does he hold like? Kiman, Kirav Huna. Ultimately again, like Rav Huna, ula mifsal kamaisa. So we'll say what that would mean is that halacha lamaisa, in the event that you discovered a nick, even the first animal would be puzzle. Or the Gemara says, or lo Rav Chista ulach shrei basraisa. Or Rabbi say could very well be according to Rav Chista. And indeed, even if you discovered the nick after the shechita of the last animal, everything would be kosher, because you could attribute the nick in the knife ultimately to what? To the backbone, to the spinal cord of the last animal. So we'll say, listen, this is actually amazing. If that's the case, that you have to check your knife before shechting each and every animal, then why doesn't the knife require a bedikas chacham? So we'll say bedikas chacham means that what? The halacha lamaisa, as we're going to see, the halacha was that a shochet, we actually made reference to this, I think yesterday or the day before, that the shochet shows his knife to the chacham ha'ir. He shows his knife to the ranking Talmid Chacham of the city to make sure that the knife is okay. So if that's the case, that halacha lamaisa, knife requires inspection before each and every shechita, then why isn't the shochet obligated to bring his knife to the Chacham of the city before every single shechita? To which the Gemara says, Eid echad ne'eman bi'isurin. Because I will say, again, one witness is believed when it comes to Isser. This is an issue of Isser, right? Whether or not it's Geshacht or whether or not it's the Nevela. So therefore, all you need is you don't have to take it to the Chacham Ha'ir. You just need the Eid Echad. The Eid Echad could be the Shochet. So we'll say, if that's the case, then why does the Shochet ever have to show his knife to the Chacham Ha'ir? Ha'am Rabbi Yochanan, to which the Gemara says, you're right. Ha'am Rabbi Yochanan, lo amru laharo sakin l'chacham, Ela mipnei kavodo shel chacham. Both said, to which the Gemara answers, you're right. The concept of showing the knife to the chacham Bosai is not a halacha. It's not a halacha. I mean, it's a halacha, but it's not a din in Hilchos Shchita. What is it a din in? Kavod tamidei chachamim. Right? That was ultimately a person has to be mechabed the Talmid Chacham. So therefore, again, the shochet is mechabed the Talmid Chacham. How? By showing him his shchita knife prior to shchita. It doesn't require him to go every single time. It's like kind of like presenting your credentials, right? I'm a shochet and I'm presenting my credentials for the Chacham Ha'ir by showing him my knife. But it's not a din in Hilchos Shchita, it's a din in Hilchos Kibud Talmidei Chachamim. Good. So now the Gemara asks a fascinating question, and this is really great. So the Gemara says, Menaha milsa dam Rabbanan, uke milsa chazoke. So we've been talking a lot about chazaka over the last couple of days, right? So remember again, this all began yesterday. With the concept of going ahead and behema becheskas iser bechayeha omedes, right? That an animal is a cheskas iser of Ever min achai. We then saw today about a person before he goes to the mikvah of having a cheskas tumah. We've seen chazaka over and over and over. So listen to this. So the Gemara says, by the way, where does this concept of chazaka come from? Where do we know the concept of chazaka? So we'll say, even though one could say it's intuitive, which it is, that in the case of doubt, you return a person, or for that matter, an object to its last known state. The Gemara says, where do we know that from? Listen to this. Rabbi Shmuel Silber, Rabbi Yonasan. The pasuk says, "V'yatsa kohen min habayis al pesach habayis v'hiskir habayis shivas yam." So listen to this. The halacha is that if a house develops tsaras, a discoloration on one of the walls, the kohen goes in to go ahead and inspect it, and he seals off the house. Now, both say, in order for a home to be sealed off, there must be at least a gris size of tsaras, like for our argument's sake, a penny's worth size of tsaras on the wall. If there's less than a gris, it's not tsaras, and the house doesn't get sealed off. So listen to this. So the kohen goes in. He sees the gris size of tsaras on the wall of the home. What does he do? Seal it off, quarantine. Remember, we're going to see what happens over the course of quarantine. So there's a problem. We'll say, what's the problem? So we'll say, how do you know that the moment that the Kohen turns his back and walks out of the house, right, maybe what? Maybe the tsaras gets smaller. Right? Maybe the tsaras gets smaller. And therefore, again, at the time that he closes it off, it's not a proper quarantine. Right? Maybe it got smaller. And therefore, there's no issue here altogether. And I will say, now understand, in order for the tsaras countdown process to go ahead and start, you can only quarantine a home if there's a gris size of tsaras. If it's less than a gris and the kohen quarantines it, it's not a good quarantine, which means if it subsequently gets bigger, you'd have to repeat the process again. So the Gemara is asking a very simple question. Kohen sees the nega, says, okay, gris, quarantine. He turns around, he walks out. How do you know at the moment he turned around or is walking out of the house that it doesn't get smaller and therefore the quarantine is null and void? To which the Gemara says, it's amazing. Rather, it must be that what? That she said that halacha l'maaseh is a chazaka. What's the chazaka? That from the time that the kohen goes ahead and turns his back and leaves the house, that the mara has not changed. That's the chazaka. Could it change over the course of the week? Sure. But at the end of the day, we assume right now it does not change. That's the chazaka. So we'll say, this is amazing. This is where the Gemara is fascinating. You could have thought of so many other cases of chazaka. This is where the Gemara is going to get out from. Maskif l'Ravacha bar Yaakov. So I don't understand why you say that. The Dilma could go sheyatza derech hachorav. We'll say, listen to the kinafik. We'll say, listen to this. Maybe when the Kohen goes out of the house, we'll say, how does he go out of the house? He walks out backwards. Why does he walk out backwards? So he can maintain ocular contact, right, with the nega the entire time, right? So he could see it. He doesn't lose sight of it. The Mishnah goes, so Abai says, there's two answers to that. Chada, the Yitzia derech achor lo shma Yitzia. So I'll say, here's the issue. The pasuk says, v'yotza HaKohen. Yitzia, Rabbi say, means a normative exit. What does a normative exit mean? You turn around and you walk front out. You walk your front of your body facing the doorway. You don't walk out backwards, right? You don't walk out backwards. So therefore, again, that's not called the Yitzia. Va'od, the Gemara says, furthermore, I'll say furthermore, what is there to say if the nega is behind the door? So I'll say if the nega is behind the door, then what? Then what? Even if you walk out backwards, there's going to be the problem that what? There's going to be a certain point in time where the door obscures your line of vision, where you can't see the nega. To which the Gemara says, "V'chitema de pasach leikavsa." Oh, so I have an answer for that also. I'll cut a window in the door. All right, now this is getting a little bit. So I'll say we're just remember again. We're just trying to figure out how. We're saying the fact that a Kohen could just walk out and assume that the gris remains the same is the proof for chazaka. All the Gemara is just trying to tell us is that halacha l'maisa, there are other ways for the Kohen to ensure that it's still a gris without having to rely on chazaka. So if it's behind the door, you'll cut a window in the door, so that way the Kohen could see the nega the entire time. The Gemara says it's not true. V'hatanan bayis afel in poskin bochalonos liros es nigo. Well, it's actually incredible halacha. The halacha is that a home, let's say you have a home, Rabbi say, which has no natural light. And therefore, again, the Kohen cannot see the color of the negat saras. He just can't see it. The halacha is, we do not punch windows into the wall and bring in natural light to allow the Kohen to be able to go ahead and see the nega. If he can't see it naturally, then what? The house, the structure is not subject to tzaras. The Gemara learns it out from a whole limud. Sefer Rabba said the Gemara is saying we don't put windows in a home with tzaras. To which the Gemara says, Amalei Rabba, I'm sorry. Vatna b'isafal in posting b'chalonos liros nego Amalei Rabba dika amrit yitzia derech achar v'shma yitzia. So we'll say Rabba now attacks these two ideas. So you said number one that walking out backwards is not considered to be a proper and formal exit. Number one, I'm going to tell you that's not true. How do I know that's not true? Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippurim yochiach. We'll say first wide line on the bottom. We'll say, how do we know that? Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur will show that exiting backwards is called a normative exit. Dichsiv be'yitziyah. And we'll say, how does the Kohen exit? Ultimately, again, the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Utnan, yotza ubalo derech knisaso. Ultimately, we'll say, what's the halacha by the Kodesh HaKadoshim? The Kohen Gadol backs out, he walks out backwards from the Kohen. He retraces his entry steps when exiting. And yet the Torah uses lashon of yitzia. So what do you see from here? Walking out backwards is called a proper exit. So don't tell me the Kohen can't walk out backwards from the house of Zaras. He can. Number two, chalonos liros es nigo. We'll say furthermore, you said you can't punch a hole in the door for him to see the nega because you don't make windows in a house with Zaras or potential Zaras. Hanimi v'hechad lo es chazik. We'll say that's only where the Kohen has not already established that there's a real potential for tzaras here. Aval heicha dis chazik is chazik. But ultimately, we'll say a case like this, where ultimately, again, the Kohen said, we've got a potential problem. Again, remember, this is a quarantine. Quarantine allows you, gives it time to see what's going to happen. But obviously, only quarantine if there's a significant probability or possibility that it's going to be tzaras. So we'll say, when don't we punch windows in the walls of the home in order for the Kohen to initially see the nega? But once the Kohen has seen it and said that there's a problem, there would be no problem technically to punch a hole in the door, ultimately so as to allow the Kohen to see the nega as he's walking out. So we'll say, so ultimately again, the way it's stopping over here is that which the Gemara wanted to suggest that halacha l'maisa, we don't have the concept of chazaka from tsaras bebatim. The fact that a Kohen could say, okay, quarantine, even though that's to be a gris, and he could turn around and walk out and still assume it hasn't changed size. All the Gemara has just shown is maybe not. Maybe there is a way for the Kohen to maintain constant visual contact until he's actually able to leave the home, declare the official quarantine, and he's able to see the nega altogether. Therefore, I will say we're still left with the question, where does the concept of chazaka come from? We'll stop over here. I'm going to record the Parsha Thought Emir Hashem after davening.